Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, as the US election enters its last lap, this week we shall be discussing, we'll be actually taking a look at the election that was, the issues that have been raised, and also which one would be better for India, candidate Hillary or candidate Trump. Joining me on the roundtable is Bharat Karnad, Professor of National Security Studies at the Center of Policy Research. Dr. Wael Awad, he's a West Asian expert. We have Kanwal Sibal, he's a former Foreign Secretary and a former Ambassador of India. And we have Pramit Pal Chaudhary, he's the foreign editor of the Hindustan Times. Mr. Sibal, I'll first begin with you. Who do you think would be better for India of the two?
Actually, it's not very material.
There was my discussion.
No, it's not very material because for various reasons. One, that there is bipartisan consensus in the United States today with regard to relationship with India in the Congress and increasingly in the establishment, with the result that it won't really matter very much which candidate becomes the president. That's one. The other is that Hillary Clinton is a known entity. It's not as if we can say that she has been very friendly towards India, or we can take her as an India lover of any sort. But she knows India very well, and she has dealt with India for so many years. So we know who she is, what her thinking is, what her policy is. So there will be predictability. Insofar as Trump is concerned, he has said some positive things about India, but he's taken position on some other issues which are problematic for us potentially. This whole business about protectionism and even with regard to doing away with this pivot and stuff like that, which means that the whole game plan of India in terms of what we are trying to do in the Asia Pacific and Indian Ocean regions will change. So he's unpredictable. But in many other ways, he has very sensible approaches to foreign policy, especially with regard to Russia, because deteriorating US-Russia relationship is not in our favor because they're giving more space to China. So finally, I think US policy towards India has always been ambivalent, a mixture of bad and good, and that will continue whether it is Trump or Hillary Clinton.
Okay, Dr. Awad, who would be better for us?
Well, I think it's a market-driven force. I would agree with Ambassador Sibal in his point of view, because it's a market-driven force. The more the Americans look for their interests, where their interests go, they go. They don't have a permanent friend or permanent enemies, so they now have a permanent interest. So I think that matters a lot. But I would say that Hillary Clinton will continue with the legacy of the White House, because she is a very shrewd politician. She has been there for 30 years. She understands the system very well.
Which is part
and she
of the
has the CIA behind her, and that will give her a lot of the South Asian affairs. Domestically, I think that Trump would be more concerned of the domestic issues rather than the international issues. That's why he's been hiring people who can speak more on the foreign policy rather. He is, because he's a naive when it comes to the foreign policy of the White House. Who's running the White House anyway? So therefore, I would say that Hillary Clinton will do much better for the Indian part of India.
What is your take on this?
As I've written somewhere, I think that Trump would be better for a very simple reason, that if you have Clinton, you have more of the same old, same old. With Trump, it's precisely because he's isolationist. He's going to get back into garrison America. He wants to withdraw from Asia, change the pivot notion. Is why I think India will have to then rely on itself. More and more, I think we've gotten into a situation where we are relying on other countries for the pivot to maintain, for America to maintain an Asia pivot, for Russia to be friendly, and so on. For too long, I think we have gotten away by keying our foreign policy, orienting our foreign policy towards external powers, rather than looking after our own specific interests. And that's what I think we need to do. And that's what I think Trump will help us willy-nilly do, because he's not really interested in the outside world, honestly. Like the Hindu Indians or whatever he met in New Jersey the other day. It was a joke, it was a farce. I mean, he said, I love Hindu. I mean, he doesn't know a Hindu from an animal, for all I understand. So he is not clued into the world. He's not clued into anything non-American. He's just keen on focusing America's, attention on internal problems, right or wrong, and whatever solutions are, is irrelevant to our concerns. But my point is, it'll make us rely on ourselves, look down deep in, and rely on our own resources to deal with the problems we have, which we particularly the China challenge.
Okay, your take.
I think I would tend to go with Ambassador Sybil. The issue ultimately is, as Bharat said, is that Trump is very much an isolationist. There's a very good article in Foreign Policy which analyzed almost all of his statements on foreign policy going back to the 1980s. And he's very clear that he's what in America would be called a Taftian. He was a Republican of the 19th century he thinks even NATO should no longer exist, that the rest of the world should basically go. And at one point he was interviewed by somebody who said, what do you think, have you gone to poor parts of the other parts of the world? And the only part of the world he could think of was something like Ohio. He says, isn't that something like, I've been to these small towns in Ohio? It must be something like that. And they were terrible in his view. He said, an awful place. I don't want to go there. He's a New Yorker, Manhattanite. He doesn't even like to go outside of Manhattan. But the problem that I would face with this, that while Bharat was correct to say that in many ways it would force India in an isolationist situation where America withdraws, force India and many other countries to come out of and do a lot of work. We, in my view, don't have that capacity yet. It would be nice to get a bit more time. We're still a very poor country. But more importantly, the country that would benefit massively is China, more so than almost any other country. And in fact, we already see this because Obama, in many ways, already had represented a form of isolationism himself. His G2 strategy, where he basically tried to form a codominium with China, his attempt to get out of Afghanistan and just hand it over to anybody, the Taliban, he didn't really care, get out of the Middle East as fast as possible, have resulted in vacuums in which nobody except countries or institutions that India generally is not very happy with, whether it's the Islamic State, the Taliban, or China, have filled those vacuums. So I think Trump would just continue those policies to an even greater extreme. And I think that would be something that while China would be particularly happy about, I'm not too certain India would necessarily benefit.
By this China logic, the China would be happier with Trump, because that's somehow got the other way around.
No, he has been making strong statements against China. But then if he also at the same time wants to withdraw from Asia. Now look, if he wants to wind up NATO, then the pivot loses all significance in his thinking. If you're going to abandon the Europeans, he can certainly abandon the Asians. So in that sense, Pramit is right, that China has already started filling up the vacuum and will fill up the vacuum even more. And this is a problem for us because our relations with China are entering into a more tense phase, with China now very openly opposing India's rise and openly opposing India's strategically in terms of what our ambitions and aspirations are. So to that extent, and I said this in some other context yesterday, that if United States withdraws from Western Pacific or is pushed back willy-nilly, that's the beginning of a serious decline of the U.S. as a global power, as a preeminent power even, because China can't confront the United States in the transatlantic area or in Europe or in Latin America or elsewhere. The only place where they can challenge the United States power, as it exerts itself really on the ground, is with the Western Pacific. So if this guy withdraws from Asia, then the field is open for China, and eventually they'll turn up in the Indian Ocean.
Okay. And also West Asia, how would you see Trump's outlook? Would it be more belligerent?
I think the first victim of this American election are the American people. Because who wanted to vote for, doesn't like Trump, he will go and vote for Hillary Clinton with his nose closed. Because it is a stinking tiffin boxes that has been opened by the mails which from the FBI and have already exposed her to a large extent about her foreign policy toward Libya, toward Syria, and how she changed the White House when she was in the office. How did she change the American look into the issues, and they have the regime change policy was implemented by the CIA, moved into Libya and moved into Syria. So we understand that the American policy toward the Middle East has never been fair to the Middle Eastern themselves. So it's always been favoring oil and gas and Israeli-centric. So for these issues, we do not see much of a changes in the American. In fact, the American credibility in the region as a superpower, as an influence partner in the Arab world has been tarnished. The image has been bad. It's even now seeing that the Saudis, they have tied a hand with them more than 65, 70 years ago. Now they are washing their hand away from the Saudis, where they have spread the Islamization in the Arab world, the growth of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, the growth of IS in the Arab world, the radicalization, supporting regimes and taking as a symbol the Qatar and Saudi Arabia of promoting democracy in the Arab world, where they don't have even a policy or they don't have a constitution or a political party. All these issues have really created a resentment within the Arab street.
Also, we were just talking about one of Trump's political plans to shift the American embassy to Jerusalem.
Well, look, if Trump wants to do it, he'll do it. Now,
can he do it?
No, there's no question of can. It's an executive order. He runs the foreign policy, and the international law is no great constraint on him or on Washington, honestly speaking. But Jerusalem is still, as it were, a city under dispute. The point of the matter is, if the American government tomorrow decides it wants to move its Jerusalem, the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, it can do it. There's nothing that he cannot do. The problem is the problem is the fallout. The question is, will even a Trump care to take the onus of doing so, and then having U.S. interests face the Arab fallout? Despite having regimes, the ruling regimes in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere in America's pocket, the fact of the matter is there's going to be a popular kind of opposition to this kind of move. Will it legitimate the Israeli ambitions, as it were? Whether that's a good thing or bad thing from India's point of view is a different thing. But the point you're asking is, what's the fallout? And this is going to be the fallout. And whether the Trump himself can do it? Yes, he can do it. But then the US will have to bear the consequences in terms of, well, if he's going to come back into island America, that's a separate thing. He doesn't give a damn. He's reducing the American profile anyway. But if the State Department and the rest of the policy establishment wishes that that doesn't happen, then he'll have opposition within the country itself to doing these kinds of things that are going to, in a sense, undermine U.S. interests for a very long time.
I can see you smiling. You want to comment?
I think without giving the Palestinian the right of existence and their own capitals, that is Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine, there will be no question on the American administration to follow and then accept it as the capital of Israel, as the united capital of where Netanyahu would like to see. I think Ivanka Trump have already, the daughter who converted in 2010 into Judaism and married to a Jewish man, have said that, and that will give her a little bit leverage among the Jewish lobby, which have the upper hand in the American election, IPAC parties and all. This will help her in giving him at least one tilting toward Trump by the Jewish lobby, that they may think that he can change. But in the American system, it is too difficult. Like it is just how they look at the Taiwan or how they look at the Tibet. It is in the American administration. They cannot go into that extent and the recognizing a place without looking back into their foreign policy basis, actually.
Raman, I know you're a foreign affairs expert, but I have kept this question for you also. Do you find something uncanny in the way, in India, the way you're saying it's usually the right-wingers are voting for Trump and the secular parties are voting for, say, Hillary? Do you see some parallel here? People are talking about comparisons between Trump and Modi, the Make in India, Make in America plank, etc.
Well, there is a bit of the economic nationalism that runs through almost any conservative economic politician, definitely. And the entire Trump's argument, of course, is that America has fallen and needs to come back. Hence the slogan, Make America Great Again. And to some degree that patterns with the RSS-BJP argument that of a Hindu civilization that had fallen on bad times and now needs to be resurrected. But the demographics politically of Trump and Modi are somewhat different. Trump is not a genuine conservative. He's actually been a Democrat most of his life. He only recently registered as a Republican. He's from New York City, in which there are virtually no Republicans anyway. It is almost a 100% Democrat city, irrespective of your income. And he has said he has no problems with gay rights. He's not religious. He doesn't fit in with a normal, traditional Republican conservative. What he is an opportunist, which is that he has seen that the Republican Party, which had effectively two wings, a corporate wing, which was a free market, small government, pro-business wing, which was based in the big metropolitan cities, and then a large white working class base, which was very conservative on the value side, and which merged these two on a combination of small government and religion and so on. That this party is effectively beginning was vulnerable to a split. And he has grabbed that white working class and now swept the corporate wing of the Republican Party aside, which is why a lot of the corporate wing has now declared for Hillary, or is pouring their money into Hillary Clinton, because they're appalled by this man who they think, who should be being trying to control these more base urges, if you wish, of his own part, of the Republicans, but has now realized that this is in fact a movement that he can now pick up. To some degree, Bernie Sanders represented a very similar wing within the Democratic Party, though there his base was essentially low-paid service workers. Modi doesn't have that. We don't have that type of a division in India. It's a much more complicated structure. Modi is looking, I would argue Modi's core base is an aspirational class that is coming out of the working class into the lower middle class right now. Probably roughly just second and third quintiles, an economist would say, and that's a rising force. They're actually looking for aspiration. They want a leader like Modi, in their view, who represents what they see as their rising future. Trump represents a class of people who have actually seen themselves decline over the past 20 years, who believe that they've been sold out by their establishment, that they've lost a lot of their income, jobs, even life expectancy among white working class males has been dropping in the United States, who they're seeing this man trying to restore a previous greatness that they used to have.
Okay. We're going to take a short break, after which I'm going to ask everybody to give their last words and also whom they think is going to be winning this election. So stay with us. Welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, we are here discussing the US elections as it enters its last lap, and Mr. Sibal, I'm going to ask you, whom do you think is going to win? What does your instinct say? It's become a very close race.
It has become a very close race, but the latest polls seem to be showing a 4% lead for Hillary Clinton. All said and done, I think Hillary Clinton is likely to win. Trump is an unknown entity, unpredictable fellow. He may have tapped into all the angst and resentment in sections of the American society, this inequality and the fact that the voice of the common man is not being heard. Corporate America is governing the country and all these foreign adventures and stuff like that. And Hillary Clinton will promise them actually much the same in terms of continuation of policy. But all said and done, I think she will edge past him, though of course in a sense she's also not a very acceptable candidate as a whole to the American people. But they've been presented with such a poor choice, and I'd like to make one final point, which is that the American presidential elections have always been a spectacle. This has been even more of a spectacle, and a kind of a meretricious kind of a spectacle, which brings shame to the whole democratic process in the United States of America, and where America has been, in a sense, trying to spread democracy worldwide, and its message is that the world should emulate them, and they present the best system in the world. I think they're doing great harm to the image of democracy in the world at large, because people see this country and see what is happening, and the low levels to which the debate has gone.
But what you said in the beginning, that people are probably going to hold their nose and vote for Hillary. So it's really not who should win, but who's going to really lose it.
I think they have already decided. Most of the United States, the provinces have already decided whom to vote for. The blue and red map have already been distributed only among the two or three, I think, states, which is the United States, like a state of Ohio, and these are the states where the American still have to be doubtful about their voting, whom to go with, Iowa or Ohio and all. But I think what matters at the end of the day is no matter who comes to the White House, it's not Hillary or it's not Trump who's going to call the shot. It is already understood that it's a franchise, as somebody called that, as a franchise candidate, Mrs. Hillary Clinton, because a market-driven forces and the United States really run the foreign office. Like if you see an American president going anywhere in the world, he doesn't take politicians or babus with him. He takes companies, he takes corporates, he wants to do business. So he means to say business. Even at the peak of the crisis in China, they were sending somebody with Taiwan. They were signing agreement for $100 million with the Chinese. So the American mean business. So it is a matter of business. Where the business takes the American candidate, they will go with it. I don't see major changes. I hope the American will have a better understanding of maybe having a third party, which is we need to see, because domestically the democracy is suffering in the United States. I fully agree with the Ambassador Karnad. It is a fact that it is sad that we know that the American democracy have really suffered a lot, and the values the American that they breach the world, they are not practicing anymore. I'm worried about that.
So in the market-driven forces, the market man is going to be losing, the businessman.
Arm industry is flourishing. It's fine. Wars aren't there.
Well, look, I think the elections now underway are riveting for all the wrong reasons. As we keep seeing two trains coming into and colliding time and again. And it's a great circus act, as it were. It is catastrophic in the sense everybody loves to witness a real smash-up. And this is why I think we are all riveted, not because there's anything intrinsically important in the elections there that's going to affect India. Now that said, I'd still hope that Trump wins, for the very reason that India, as I said, would be compelled then to rely on itself, on its own resources, and on doing the kinds of things it has not done heretofore, which is build up alliances in Asia, Rimland Alliance, to hedge in China, make friends. Don't be so fixated on Pakistan, which is going to really ends up defeating your larger, realization of your larger strategic objectives, which is China. Because China is your rival, not some little country on the flank, Pakistan, whose GDP is less than, 1/7, the last I saw it, 1/7 of the capitalization of the Mumbai Stock Exchange. Forget the GDP. Mumbai Stock Exchange, and we enhance it, we raise it to the point of being a threat. We are turning out to be a joke when we talk that way. So we'll have to become far more realistic when Trump is in the chair, because he doesn't give a damn for the world outside, which means he wouldn't, as everybody has stressed, Asia is not important to him, far less so than is Europe, and so on and so forth. So the attention will, in a sense, reduce to some spots here and there. And that may not be such a bad thing for India. As I said, it will force it for the Indian government to, as I said again, concentrate on the major job at hand.
As you mentioned, that the polls are tightening, but I would argue that has less to do with the FBI email story than the fact that the Libertarian Party candidate, Gary Johnson, has seen his campaign disintegrate. He's gone from about 10% of the popular vote to less than 4% now. And most of that vote, 2/3 of his support base, were disaffected Republicans. And I think those are now shifting back into the Republican camp, which is giving Trump a smiled 4% boost, 2 to 3% boost. And you can see, if you look at the trend lines, that was actually rising even before the FBI email track, but it was tracking Johnson's collapse as a candidate. But ultimately, that's not going to be enough, I think, because the electoral college system, Trump may actually win the popular vote. That's not impossible. White working class vote, if he can get a turnout of about 60 or 70%, normally only about half of them bother to vote, he would sweep in terms of the popular vote, because they're still by far the single largest chunk of the population. But his problem is that in the white middle class, the college-educated whites really dislike him. I mean, there's a huge, massive turnout against him. And the minority vote is more or less sticking, obviously, with the Democratic Party, not least of all because of his comments on Hispanics. So broadly on the electoral college front, if you look at the numbers there, I think it's pretty clear that Hillary has a lead that is almost impossible for Trump to defeat. He would have to win almost every single swing state. You mentioned Ohio, Wisconsin, Florida, as well as eat away at some of the states that are now presently in the Democratic camp. He'd at least to take 1 or 2 of them onto his camp for him to be able to pass the electoral college margin. But it would be another a constitutional mess, because he would effectively win the popular vote and Hillary would win it on the electoral college vote. It would be another Al Gore versus George Bush. But unlike Al Gore, I would expect Trump to fight like crazy on this.
But we'll wait for that fight. But from now, that's it from us. This has really been the last of our debates on the US presidential campaign. Next time we meet, America would have chosen its next president, so we'll discuss that. But thank you for watching this show, and we'll see you again same time next week.